Welcome to the wounded person, the role you play in the toxic, unhealthy relationship cycle. Now, we have all been in relationships before. However, the role that we play in those relationships is a major part of what ends up happening as far as the whole entire process is concerned. So we're going to dive deep right on into the wounded person, the role you play in this toxic slash unhealthy relationship cycle. With any relationship, there is a cycle of different things that go on. And the first part of our unhealthy relationship cycle is craving. The second part is the new relationship. The third part is our unhealthy patterns of behavior. The fourth part is our languishing. And the fifth part is the exit. And I'm going to go into great detail on how each of these parts play a role in how we navigate in our relationships, the roles we play, and how we end up where it is that we end up. Okay, once again, we are going to talk about the relationship cycle. So the first cycle that you saw was the one of the unhealthy relationship cycle. This picture here is the one of the healthy relationship cycle. And when you have a healthy relationship cycle, you start off with the craving, you enter the new relationship, the unhealthy patterns of behavior and problems occur. Then you move over to the therapy, support group, community help, and conflict resolution. As a result of that process, the next part of the cycle is a healthy, flourishing relationship. And sometimes this cycle can go round and round in the very same relationship because we change as people, our spouses change as people, we change as people, our ministry partners change, our co-workers change, our friends change, and well, we should be. I won't say that they change and we change. We should be changing, we should be growing, they should be changing, they should be growing. And so if we are operating out of a growth mindset, then what happens is that when we're entering this cycle for the healthy relationship, this is exactly what it is that should be going on as opposed to the unhealthy relationship. We never get to the therapy support group, community, and the conflict resolution. And I do want to change one thing. Instead of saying never, sometimes we do. Usually it's one person that realizes, and 9 times out of 10, it's the woman, I need to go get help. Even if they're shameful about it or whatever stigma, that you think about as far as in society and going to therapy, although that's lessened, there's still stigmas out there, and there's stigmas and different stereotypes even within family units. And I know even for my particular race, there are stigmas out there for, we have the Black superwoman stigma, and Black women are strong, Black women don't show emotions. We can just pray out whatever issues and we don't need therapy. So each and every ethnic group slash nationality have their own type of stigmas. But when you are in a healthy, flourishing relationship, in a healthy relationship in general, you are seeking therapy, and then you are going, you can be individual and a couple, you're trying to make it work and get out all of the kinks and different things that you see that is going on after the honeymoon stage. when I am working in any type of setting, whether it's a setting of teaching or a setting of, it could be a small group, any type of setting, I like to now use my 5-part VG5 core concept framework. And this is a cycle that I use that pretty much mimics the cycle that I use when it comes to helping others resolve their computer issues. And the first part of that cycle is that I'm analyzing. The second part of that cycle is that I'm troubleshooting. The third part of that cycle involves implementing. And the fourth part of that cycle is empowerment. And the fifth part of that cycle is where the impact takes place. And so the impact cannot be made, which is the last part, until you're empowered. Once you're empowered, you are ready to impact. Not only impact the people you are involved with, but they will in turn impact other people. You impact your household when we decide that we are not going to allow ourselves to get caught up in unhealthy relationship patterns, toxic thinking, limiting beliefs, then that empowerment, those decisions, those choices that we make empower others, and our households, empowers our children, and it can even empower spouses slash significant others that we are dating. But when we make our decisions and we make those changes, those necessary changes, our choices do affect other people and they impact our relationship with those people. We either, like they say, brokenness attracts brokenness, change also attracts change. Okay, so when we think of cravings, the first thing it made me think about, when you think of cravings, you think of being pregnant and something that you just gotta have. I know when I was pregnant with my son, that's my first child, my cravings was really weird. It was Country Time lemonade. It had to be Country Time lemonade. And my ex-husband, after a while, he told his friend, I got smart, I'm buying them by the case now. So I don't have to keep going out every night to buy Country Time lemonade. And so Country Time lemonade was my favorite. It was that. And then the other thing, for some strange reason, I would crave tortas and Milanesa. And one time I had a really bad craving for those tortas. And my ex-husband went over to the Mexican restaurant and they did not have it. And I was not, I was not a happy camper. And you would have thought that the whole world had ended. And I forgot what type of meat they had. And they said they could make it with something different. But my mind, you know how it is when you're pregnant, my mind was set on what it is that I wanted. And so the same thing can happen with cravings. I don't know if you women experience it, but even when you are on your menstrual cycles, those cravings come, and the next thing you know, you just, oh my goodness, you feel like you just gotta have it. And for me, a lot of times, and I'm not a person that just like a whole lot of sweets, I have selective things, and usually those selective things involve chocolate chip cookies, those type of things. But when it comes to me during the cycle time, it's usually, like I said, a chocolate chip cookies or some Doritos or something like that. And for some reason with women, it's usually that sweet and salty blend together that we're craving. So when we think of those cravings, we think of food. We don't think of relationships. God has actually put us here with natural cravings for relationships. As weird as it sounds, cravings are normal. And as a matter of fact, it's nothing more than evidence that we are human. Sometimes we can get so holy and sanctified that we think relationship cravings are wrong. God created Eve so that she could satisfy Adam's cravings for human relationship. And that's really powerful when you think about it. The human craving for relationship, that is why he created Eve, so that desire could be fulfilled within Adam. And that's even though Adam already had a relationship with God, but that is what God's main purpose was when he created Eve. He created us to crave relationships. But then what happens when we crave those relationships? We can get into trouble when our cravings lead to lust, or we place our craving for a human relationship above our craving for the relationship with God. We are desiring humans more than we are desiring God. And that was not God's plan when he created the whole idea of relationships. And that whole concept of relationships is shown forth when you think about God the Father, God the Son, and God the Holy Spirit, the three in one that is called the Trinity. Okay. Our cravings for relationships enable us to know that we were indeed made for community. Now, when it comes to us making a decision that we want an empowered new chapter of life, we know that creating that empowered new chapter is going to involve healing from our past hurts. And when you heal from your past hurts, then it gives us a perspective. And that perspective is different than the perspective, the perspective we have from healing is going to be different from the perspective we had pre-healing. Our ability to see the whole reason for our existence is based upon the concept of relationships. And that perspective will even change as well once we have gone far enough in our healing. Now, we have talked about this before, but we're going to go over it again, just really briefly. When we dissect the healthy and unhealthy cycle of any relationship, we will notice that both cycles begin with that craving. It is what happens next that often gets us in trouble. So the craving itself, as I mentioned before, is not unhealthy. It is natural. It is how our bodies and the whole mind, body, soul thing was made up. But there should be more of a craving for the things of the Lord than our cravings for another individual. And that's when it's not, that's when we get into the idol worship. When we are entering a new relationship, it's like opening the door. You know, you come home, you tired from work, and you go and you open the door, but you're kind of scared to open the door. You picture yourself like you got just like for instance, you got 3 or 4 teenagers at home. And when you come in, whether it's the front door or through the garage, and you open that door, you don't know what's on the other side. Okay? And it also makes you think about, I know I used to watch when my grandmother was living. Back in the day, I would watch The Price is Right with her. And then the contestants would have 2 or 3 doors, and they had to pick which option they were going to go along with. So when you are entering a new relationship, it's just like the contestant that's picking a door that holds their prize. Think about that for a moment. You having to stand there and decide which door you are going to pick. And depending on which door you're picking, what's going to be on the other side of that door. That is what we don't know when we are entering a new relationship of any kind. What is going to be on the other side of that door? So when we enter the new relationship cycle and you think about it, the prize that awaits you on the other side of the door in this relationship could be desirable or undesirable. And the thing about it is, we don't know. It's all about perspective, okay? Because what's desirable to me may not be desirable for you, and vice versa. But what we do know is that when we go right before we open, that just opening the door itself is taking a chance. We're making the choice to open that door to community and new relationships based upon the natural cravings that we have all been wired up with. What we don't know is that what is going to happen when we take that chance to open the door to that new relationship of any kind. Okay, and we already talked about this particular example, is that after work, not knowing how your house is going to be, if it's going to be completely trashed and you're going to want to run and go back into your car and go back to work, or if you're going to walk in the door and just can go, huh, thank you, Jesus, I'm home. Home, sweet home. And I can sit down and I can relax. And sometimes it's not even a matter of the house being trashed. It's you walking in the door and being greeted with drama, ongoing drama that's going to be right there to hit you right in the face when you enter the door. That's not on anybody's list. The question is that remains, though, are we going to embrace what's inside? What we see inside once we open the door, or are we going to take off running? Because entering a new relationship is the same way. Only time will tell what it is that we have gotten ourselves into. And sometimes that length of time is not that long. But if we're so caught up, we miss out on the red flags that are coming along. That can be a problem. It's normal to be apprehensive whenever you start any relationship because you don't know what's going to happen when you open that door, as we talked about, okay? And the other thing that's normal is for both parties to be overly concerned with putting on an impression for the other person. I want you guys to really think about that for a moment. When you are embarking on a new friendship or a new relationship with the other guy, the other person, I meant to say, this guy, think about this. I'm going to grab some water for a minute, but think about all of your concerns when you start out a new relationship about putting on an impression for the other person. Think about that just for a quick moment. Okay, so now that you've thought about that, at the very beginning, when you're trying to make all of these impressions and trying to make sure that your hair is pretty enough or the makeup you put on is just right. Now that you've done all of that, think about how much it is that you want to be liked in the beginning. And you want to appear agreeable with the other person. So let's say, for instance, and I remember how this happened for me. One person say, let's go to, the guy says, let's go to the movies. What do you want to see? And then the other person may say, then you might say, this is you. Whatever you want to see. Whatever you want to see. It's usually like that. Okay. And then you might say, what do you want to see? And then the other person, whatever you want to see. It's kind of like the movie Coming to America, when the guy said, well, what do you like? And she said, whatever you like. And what do you want to do? Whatever you want to do. And what do you like? And whatever you like. And after a while, that got on his last nerve. Because, yes, of course, in the beginning, as I said, we want to be agreeable. We want to make the first impressions. But the thing about it is, we also, after a while, have to get to the point of being able to spread off and have our own individual identity, because we don't always like what other people like. A lot of times we're doing it because we want to appear to be agreeable and likable. And so those things are really important in the beginning, but it's also important not to stay in that part of the entering a new relationship phase, okay? We don't care about what it is initially. What we want to do is just have companionship, doing the social thing, and having the work partnership in place is what we want to do in the beginning. We're not really concerned about, oh, well, maybe I should say what I really want to do. We're trying to be likable. We're trying to be agreeable, all of those different things. So you think back to the beginning of the relationship you're in or the one that you were in, think back to how it was, and you will go, aha, that is true. Even though, he wanted to do this, but I really wanted to do that. But I decided to say that I want to do what he wants to do because I didn't want it to be a problem. And I really liked him. We get caught up in the beginning. That's why they call it the honeymoon phase. And so most times we are also people pleasing, seeking to make that big impression, making sure, we get consumed with whether the other person likes us after a while. But no matter what kind of relationship is, like in the movie Coming to America, this gets played out and we get sick and tired of going along with everything someone else wants to do. And the thing is that we get sick and tired of it, but guess what? We were the ones who started it in the first place. And that is what happens a lot of times. The very thing that we get sick and tired of, we initiate or start that pattern of behavior to begin with. At first, it wasn't a problem because we were so caught up into being likable and making an impression. But now we cannot stand this about that person, but we actually help to set up that dynamic, if that makes sense. Okay, so we're seeking to come out of that, whatever you like and whatever you want to do, and whatever you like and whatever you want to do. We want to make our voices known, and for the other person that we are dating to know who we really are. Okay? And so when we're creating our empowered new chapter of life, that involves having emotional, mental, spiritual, and physical boundaries in our relationships. It's not about having ourselves so wrapped up into the other person that we lose ourselves. That's not what it's about. And the key sign that you are headed towards an unhealthy relationship is in the beginning phases, you are placed on a pedestal like a trophy, okay, for everybody else to see. And it makes me think about myself where it was just like, whoo, look at my woman. This is my woman. Look at her. Everybody, look at my woman. So it's that type of thing, okay? And there's also a certain level of energy that comes along, that goes along with that, rather. And that energy makes you feel naked, exposed, and filled with shame. People have information about you that makes you feel uncomfortable, and that energy is there. But when we're so caught up in the beginning, we notice these things, but we turn our heads to them. And we pretend like they don't exist because we're so caught up / in love / in a state of euphoria. This is my man. He loves me. And woo, I've never experienced anything like this before. And so I'm just going to take it all in. But at the same time, our minds are still, that cognitive dissonance is setting in. Something doesn't feel quite right, but I can't put my finger on it. But I know I feel very shameful right now. Okay? So those are the key signs for the beginning of an unhealthy relationship where you are just, and of course, when you're in love, you're on cloud 9, but this is an overemphasis on being placed way up high. And there's something in that energy. I have experienced it before, but it's something in that energy and the energies of others who have talked with whoever you are dating that comes out. But when you just kind of, instead of stopping, and as far as those 5 things, that A-tie-I, that's part of the framework, when you stop and analyze, we stop and use that time, but a lot of times that's where the problem comes in, is that we don't stop and take the time of thinking, why do I feel like something is off? Something is wrong with the amount of energy. Why am I feeling ashamed? You should not feel ashamed when someone is proud to have you as their woman. But if you are treated, if you are love bombed, sometimes what they call it, or placed on a pedestal like you're a trophy, that is the energy that is going to bring out. Okay, so what happens when the honeymoon phases of these relationships are over? What happens when both parties decide to exert their likes and dislikes? And then even more importantly, what happens when we start to ignore our own needs if this continues and we're so caught up in the needs of the other person to the point of being blinded? And yes, these are a lot of questions to ponder, but they are necessary. And so the truth of the matter is, if we do not work at keeping our own individual identity, we become involved in what psychologists call enmeshment and or codependency, where we and these 2 situations, they are not happening overnight. Okay, it's kind of like when you put a frog in the boiling water. That frog is not just burnt up all of a sudden. You think about the knob on the stove, how it's low. You turn on the stove, and then you might turn on real low, and then you might, I need to turn up a little bit higher, then a little bit higher, then a little bit higher. Your aim is to get the water boiling. And it makes me think about, when I think about oatmeal, if you don't time it just right, you can have a disaster. And I've had it to happen several times. I can just do this and that and the other. Next thing you know, oatmeal is all over the top of the stove. And it's the same thing with the frog in the boiling water, is that the heat is turned up a little bit at a time, and next thing you know, you're on fire and you're hopping. You think about a frog, you hopping all over the place trying to get relief from that heat. But it seems like there's no relief. You got a disaster like the oatmeal that's all over the top of the stove, and you've seen it bubbling. You've seen it, and you know it's gonna be okay. And next thing you know, it's a disaster. And that's what we think in these relationships is going to be okay. But when our identity and self-worth gets so entwined to another person, we can end up with enmeshment. We can end up with codependency. We can end up with a cocktail of the two. And our own childhood wounds and insecurities, along with that of the other person, are going to play a huge part in whether or not these new identities are developing. And so when you think of the word codependency, automatically it comes to mind. For years, it was just like, okay, we talk about somebody that lived with an alcoholic. And that's what I thought it meant. So when I heard it, already I had a negative, there were negative vibes and connotations in my head. It's like codependent. No, I'm not codependent. Like, what are they talking about? And that's what I thought it meant. But it's a narrow view of the word codependency. And it took me a while to learn that. It's a very narrow view. Codependency, in basic terms, is strictly an enabler. You are enabling / assisting your spouse, your life-giving friends, your family members, your kids, your co-workers, your ministry partners, etc., to be irresponsible in whatever area that they are struggling in. It could be enabling by giving them money for their addictions because you don't want to hear their mouth. You don't want to deal with the backlash of saying no to them. Okay? It can be arguing back and forth with that person about their addiction / issue, which in turn is going to make them blame you because arguing with them about the issue takes the mirror away from them and onto you. And it took me a while to be able to catch on to that. My therapist had to help me to see that. Okay? Or it could be simply turning your head and ignoring, literally ignoring what it is that they are doing instead of creating boundaries, which in turn would mean that you are exerting your rights as an individual, and it also forces there to be some type of accountability for how we're going to live and or function. So once the honeymoon phase of a relationship is over, that's when the problems occur. And then, to be honest, the problems were already occurring. It's just that you were so in love, you were so caught up, you were so much in this high pedestal that you did not see the red flags that were already just going off, like those exclamation points going off. Something is wrong. Okay, and it makes me think about that show I used to watch as a kid, and then I think even as a young adult I watched it. It was called Lost in Space, and it's something wrong, and next thing you know, you hear all of these like noises of these sirens and different things going off to let you know something is wrong. Okay, so you were just so in love that you ignored them. And then if you were not strong in your identity as well, that's usually those problems that's connected with identity and self-worth, and your partner isn't being responsible, you can slowly fall into the role of taking up the slack. Okay? We can easily fall. It's not like this is just specific to you. A lot of women fall into this role. And so just like doing everything your partner wants to do in the beginning of the relationship when you enter it, so does codependency. It gets played out. But then the question that remains is that you don't know how to get out of this cycle. If you're in a codependency rather / enmeshment cycle, your question becomes, how do I get out of this mess? I don't know what to do. Okay. So there does come to a point in time when you can have, it could be a little mini moment. It could be a major moment, what we call a come to Jesus moment, when we realize, okay, I am a codependent. So now what? What do I do now? And that's definitely a valid question. And a lot of times we will go there, but we won't go there long enough. Because going there long enough, especially if you're in a marriage, whatever it is, we know, marriage, friendship, like I said, I named all the different situations, ministry, work. Once we know something, we cannot unknow it. So that means that we have the responsibility to do something about it. And it also means a lot of times that we would rather go with what we're comfortable with, our comfort zone, than to have pain and grow. Because comfort and growth cannot coexist. And so we would rather stay in the comfortable, painful zone of knowing things are not right and I need to work hard on myself so that things can be better. We rather be uncomfortable in the comfort zone than to go to the growth area. Because like I said, we can't unknow what we know, but we can sit around and pretend and ignore like it doesn't exist. We have to set up, in a sense, a kind of like a fantasy island where all our dreams come true, where we are, in a sense, gaslighting ourselves into believing things are different than what they are. It's amazing at what the mind will do when it's faced with the reality of the situation that we are in, because sometimes it can just be way too overwhelming. And so just like you're dealing with the computer problem, though, you have to analyze the why in the relationships. And like any other sins, codependency is rooted in fear. It's the fear of the unknown. What will happen if the bills don't get paid? If I don't pay the bills? What will happen if I don't budget the money? Because remember, you have taken over everything that person is normally doing, and you're seeing the irresponsibility, so you figure it's your responsibility to take up the slack and everything. Because, okay, if you don't, that fear kicks in, fear of the unknown, and fear of, hey, I could be part of the downfall as a result of this person's irresponsibility. Does that mean I'm going to end up homeless? Does that mean me and my kids are going to have to suffer and go hungry, end up broke, having to downsize? As women, we've been trained to take up the slack. And just like tying our kids' shoes is easier for us than listen to them whine and scream, I can't do it, and falling out. That's easier. Doing things for other people that involves no hassle, that seems easier and safer. Plus, who wants to hear that whining, right? Who wants to hear the whining? And that's our rationale behind it. And it's often the truth when I think about it. When I open that car door after work, just like opening the door of a new relationship, and my daughter, who was 1 year old at the time, no, close to 1, she was under 1, and she would fall out and arch her back and scream and holler until I nursed her. I thought about turning right back around and going back into work. Whereas leaving out the door of work, I was thinking, home sweet home. I get a chance to rest my brain because I have been thinking and analyzing all day long. So it's just like that. Nobody wants to hear that noise. And so I would have to end up nursing her in order for her to calm down. And then what I had to do is like, okay, this is the first time I'm going to start weaning her. And the first thing that I'm going to do is start weaning her from me getting in the car and wanting to nurse as soon as I get into the car. But who wants to hear that, right? And so instead of wanting to hear that, we keep tying the shoes. Our kids don't grow, let alone do they understand the concept of a struggle and the concept of struggle as a natural process. The same thing becomes true for your partner. As long as you keep tying his shoes, the irresponsibility continues and it increases. There's no struggle, there's no growth. And growth cannot happen without discomfort. And one thing that became hard for me to understand is when my therapist explained that the only reason that we continue in an unhealthy relationship cycle is because we are getting something out of it. And that is the second part of the why. The first part dealt with fear. The second part is our own brokenness. Codependency works because there is a need in you that is being fulfilled. And that need is tied into your own insecurities and unheld areas. Just like my need was for me having my self-worth fulfilled. And so I looked to my ex-husband to provide my self-worth. Okay, I looked to him to provide that because I felt that that is what I deserved. I was not his equal, is what the sick, twisted part that Satan had me to believe. That I did not deserve him. I was not good enough for him. Okay? And that need, like I said, is tied into our own insecurity, it's tied into our unhealed areas. And when we create that empowered new chapter of life, it involves healing from past hurts. And then in turn, the healing from past hurts helps us to gain resilience and perspective. Most of all, it helps us to gain perspective. So we're going to talk a little bit more about the insecurities as well. Okay, so no matter what situation it is, the hardest part about taking on any task when it comes to self-growth and self-development is dealing with ourselves. It's dealing with you. It feels better to take a mirror and hold it up to somebody else and say, look, this is how you look. You look like this, and you look like that, you look like this. But what happens when we hold the mirror up to ourselves? It feels better doing that to other people. But paying attention to what everybody else is doing is the blinder for minding our own business and digging deeper into our own pile of junk. It just feels better. And when you are playing the role of a codependent, you figure, hey, I don't have time to check in with me and what's really going on with me or my feelings. I got to save the other person, because I'm dependent on them to fulfill whatever that need is. And with me, like I said, it was the self-worth. If you're dependent on them to provide that need for you, whatever it is that you have been tricked, the lie you've been told and believed from Satan, which is rooted in fear and your own insecurities, then that's why you stay in the state of codependency, and you could possibly stay in the state of enmeshment. Okay? Codependency is real. The common areas of insecurities and of brokenness are low self-esteem, low self-worth, you got poor body image, and not enoughness. And codependents, they cover up these areas because they become the savior of the day in their spouses, their co-workers, their friends, and ministry partners' life. Okay? And so when you have that come to Jesus moment, you stop doing things for the other person. If you don't take the time to stop and do the self work, you're going to be right back to wearing your cape as savior of the day and playing Jesus. That's exactly what ends up happening. Frustration is our catalyst for change, though. However, that is only if the desire and hard work required to be a better version of you outweighs the pain of staying in the comfort zone of where you are now. The unhealthy patterns of behavior is the next part of the unhealthy relationship cycle, which we've already talked about, the codependency. Okay, we've already talked about that part. Okay, other unhealthy patterns of behavior that begins is alcoholism. We got pornography, infidelity, silent treatment, and guilt and shame. That happens, you will bring up something to your partner about his behavior, and then all of a sudden, he switches it around to talking about something with you, and then it's usually something that catches you off guard, and this is what happens in an unhealthy relationship cycle. Then you feel guilty and obligated to make a change. You feel shameful. You start apologizing, and the next thing you know, you're right back to where everything was going again, not realizing that the whole conversation started on what that person was doing, but they figured out a way to turn it around to what you're doing, okay? Another part of unhealthy patterns of behavior, another piece is covering up and making up excuses for the other person. You become masters at doing it. Codependency, we talked about. And then with enmeshment, your identity is so caught up into the other person, you don't know where your emotional, mental, physical, spiritual boundaries, you don't have a clue as to where they begin and where they end. That person becomes like an extension of yourself. If that person isn't happy, you're not happy. And I mean, it can just get really, really toxic and crazy and very painful to come out of, even with a therapist, but it is possible. It can happen with work. And the next part, another thing that can be under unhealthy relationship, unhealthy pattern of behavior in the unhealthy relationship cycle is avoidance. Instead of doing what it is that needs to be done, I'm going to do something else. That is what's involved in avoidance. Okay? So the next part of the unhealthy relationship cycle is the board games begin. The partner says, I need you to dress sexier or more like urban style. So you go and do that. And then things will be fine with us. You go and do that. But nothing happens. I need you to wear a different hairstyle, more, go ahead and get your updo or get your twist out or flat iron or get your hair dyed. I need you to do that. And then nothing happens. Okay? So then the next thing, you are on the hamster wheel of hustling to make things happen. And when you're in a hamster wheel of hustling, the same thing is happening over and over and over again. You keep trying to figure out how to get back to being on the pedestal and being the trophy, which was not healthy to begin with, but because you were so in love, you didn't catch it. And so then the next board game you play, oh, you're not smart enough. If you would just do this and take classes and do that, so you go take the classes. But that doesn't do anything, okay? Then you're told you need to keep up with their other friends, your partner's other friends, the other women in their life, their co-workers, okay? So you do that, but then that doesn't do anything. and then you keep being told to do different things so it can get back to where it was. But the thing about it is, it's never going to get back to the beginning, okay? Because the beginning was toxic to begin with. At first, you were put on a pedestal, and then it switched where you are expected to praise and put the other person on a pedestal. This is what happens in the unhealthy relationship cycle. So what is the result of all of that? You enter the next part of the cycle entitled languishing. You are emotionally, mentally, spiritually, and physically spent. You have compromised all your beliefs and values. Desperate to have your needs met, you're lonely, you are confused, heartbroken. And then you are displaying behavior that's uncharacteristic behavior and incongruent with your beliefs and values. You can start arguments freely, okay? Because arguments are better than no attention at all. You keep trying to fix him. When you're in a state of languishing, it sounds just the way it is. It's painful, and you're desperate. You just will do anything, okay? You're covering up, making excuses to family and friends. There's uncertainty. You're experiencing more gaslighting, and there is just a sense of desperation. And they are running. Your partner is running. They are on the go. Okay? Languishing dialogue would be dialogue that involves fear and limiting beliefs. You're being told you're not pretty enough. This is what you start telling yourself, because basically this is what you've already been told. You've internalized it. You're not pretty enough. You're not smart enough. You're not educated enough. You're not dressed well enough. You're not sanctified enough. You're not spiritual enough. You're not holy enough. The list can go on and on and on. The next thing that happens is that the chase begins. You take off after your partner. You're languishing, you're desperate, you're taking off after him. And guess what? He's running even more. And you're running even harder. You fight about it. Okay? It gets quiet for a little bit after the fight. Because look, at least some attention is better than no attention at all. And you sit up all night, mad going, racing. You're trying to come up with the magic formula to get back to square one. The chase begins again. This whole thing starts over all over again. And guess what? You are sick and tired of this relationship and of going from one difficult, unhealthy relationship to the next. You've been trying to fix the other person, but it's not working. And if anything, it seems like the more you try to fix them, the further that they are running. You're working hard. You got to come up with a plan to fix the other person. And as a matter of fact, you are burning the midnight oil daily. First, it was just a few times a week, but now it's daily. Because if you could just figure out the magic formula to fix this person, you know, I'm on the right track. And you know what? You can throw on a little manipulation, need be. You have determined that you're all in. You're putting everything on the line to make the relationship work with this individual, even if it means you're worn out in the process. But it's going to be worth it. At least you will have your needs met. And the irony of this situation is that the harder you work, the more hopeless, confused, frustrated, defeated, and the lonelier you're becoming. You are literally in a state of languishing. If God has promised you a life of abundance, this could not be what it looks like. Could not be. Trying to fix and control another person is going to bring resistance and immediate pushback. Because guess what? God created us out of love. And in that love, he gave us freedom. And trying to fix and control that love means you're just turning your desires against that other person's will, which is placing them in bondage, which means you're going to be running after that person who is walking away from you emotionally, mentally, spiritually, and physically, and that's creating a toxic dance cycle. And this is why your efforts to lasso them back in is not working. It is not working at all. But you don't know that. You do not know that. It is not working. Okay? You're thinking it's just you if you just can figure it out. There's something wrong with you. That is what you are thinking. That is something wrong with you as far as why this is not working, and you just got to figure it out, and you are going to figure it out because you are the rescuer. You are the fixer. Okay? You are the controller. But that's why their efforts are not working, because you have created a toxic dance cycle. So how do you get rid of this? You got to address the root issues of your control. Everything else that needs to happen in order for you to be in a healthy relationship will fall into place. And it might sound simple, and it is simple. But we all know the saying, simple does not equal easy. In my VG5 framework of core concepts coaching program, we identify the sources of your control. And then we work on managing your need to control using the same methods that I use as a computer technician that I talked about before, the ATI-I, where you analyze, you troubleshoot, you implement, you empower, then you can impact. In that order, okay? When the control is managed, we use the same ATI-I method to troubleshoot your PC, which is your soul. And then we rebuild your PC, your soul. And then we create software, the new software, which is your mindset. Once you complete this 6-month program, you're not just going to be able to handle the one difficult relationship you're in. You're going to possess the skills of empowerment and abundance to impact and resolve every relationship that you engage in on every level. But if you book a call now, and you can go out there to thevalleyofgrace.com and book your 30-minute free coaching session. Once you book your call, this is when you can start reclaiming that power and identity, enjoying your healthy, flourishing relationships that thrive, okay? And the options for the program, we got a breakthrough session, one breakthrough session, a 3-month program, and a 6-month program. But to be honest with you, the 6-month program is the one that's most beneficial because you're going to go through all of those areas to rebuild yourself, okay? And who is it for? For individuals going from one broken relationship to the next. When your identity and self-worth is tied up into the other person, you're confused, you're lonely, languishing, and on the hamster wheel. And you think the solution is fixing / controlling / trying to change the other person. But then there are some individuals that's not for it. If you cannot take responsibility, if you cannot get stuck out of the blame, get out of that blame cycle, if you need to be in therapy prior to being coached, if you're stuck in self-pity that blinds you, if you're waiting for someone else to change coaching, or you're waiting for the coach to change you, to do the work for you, then it's not for you. Remember the cycle for unhealthy relationship. You're craving, then you got the new relationship, then there are the unhealthy patterns of behavior, you enter the languishing, and the next thing is that somebody's exiting. Somebody's going to leave. It's usually the other person. It could be you, but it's usually the other person. They're on to the next person. And if they've got serious, we all could have abandonment issues, but a person with extreme abandonment issues often leave you before you leave them. Or they self-sabotage so you can leave or put them out. Somebody's going to leave. And then the unhealthy relationship cycle that we started with the craving, it starts all over again with the next person. Okay? We can go from the beginning being unhealthy and broken, to empowered and flourishing. But the choice is ours, okay? You as a person, you get to write a new chapter. You get to decide how your story ends. I hope that this presentation has been very helpful for you. Don't forget to book your free 30-minute call at thevalleyofgrace.com. And I hope that you have a blessed rest of your day. Take care, and until next time.